To many people, New Zealand is irrelevant, a minor island nation isolated in the South Pacific with few resources and little clout. But it's also one of the most developed nations on Earth. It's ranked among the world's freest countries in political rights and civil liberties, with some of the best race relations in the world. Prime Minister Helen is determined to bring this culture of tolerance and political maturity to the world stage and help build bridges in troubled times. I'm Taimur Nabili, and on this edition of 101 East, I speak to the leader of a small country that's determined to play a bigger part on the world stage. Prime Minister, let's talk about sort of the broader Asia picture as far as New Zealand is concerned. From what I understand, some of your 12 out of 20, I think was the figure you mentioned, biggest trading partners are Asian. What do you see as the future for New Zealand's relationship with Asia, particularly in the light of historical relationships with the Western countries?
The most economically dynamic region of the world is the Asia Pacific, and we're fortunate to be geographically located in the southern part of it. So we see our economic future very much linked with this broader region, and we put a tremendous amount of time into building relationships with the nations of East Asia in particular. New Zealand's an interesting country because it sits in the south of the region with still a 70% European population, with a strong indigenous population, growing Pacific and Asian populations. A lot of us have heritage links to the Northern Hemisphere and to Europe, but we know we have to find our way in this part of the world as well.
How comfortable are you in that company, though? Because obviously within ASEAN, a number of the key elements of the dialogue are issues that you have in the past expressed discomfort with, and let's just talk about the obvious ones, human rights in Myanmar and in China, for instance.
I think it's interesting that ASEAN itself is beginning to tackle more directly the issue of Myanmar. Clearly many countries aren't comfortable with what's happening there.
More directly, certainly in an ASEAN context, but is it directly enough for you?
Well, we're more direct, of course. That's our tradition, and that's our heritage, and that's our value system. But I've been encouraged to see, for example, the quite explicit statements coming out of ASEAN parliamentarians' bodies over the last couple of years with respect to the Myanmar situation.
So you're happy with the progress that's being made and the pace of progress right now?
I think this is a change for ASEAN to start to look at issues in a member country which see that country probably falling a little short of where the ASEAN Charter is going to go.
On a similar note, but a slightly different geographical focus, the relationship in the South Pacific is getting a little bit more tenuous. I mean, Commodore Bainimarama and you have exchanged words. How would you classify that relationship right now, and how do you feel about the state of it?
We're very concerned that within a period of 19 years, Fiji had 4 military coups, and each time it's had a coup, it's set back its development, economic and social, by many, many years. So there's a weary feeling when you have another coup. There was one in 2000, the first year I was Prime Minister of New Zealand. Now another one at the end of 2006, when we'd just begun to really consolidate strong relations again. It's not just New Zealand which is concerned about this. It's the Commonwealth, which has suspended membership. It's the Pacific Island Forum, which has given Fiji a very clear message about the pathway it must tread. It's the European Union, which is the major development partner, which is insisting on timelines for a return to constitutional government.
And still there is the Pacific Leaders Forum happening later on this year, at which both you and Mr. Bainimarama are expected to be present. How will you approach that particular event?
Well, the issue of who attends is not yet determined. The Pacific Island Forum will want to address what the appropriate level of representation for Fiji is, and that issue hasn't been directly tackled at this time.
If he does come, would you consider not attending?
The Pacific Island Forum is very important to us, and it's most unlikely that we would leave the dance floor clear for him to play on.
What then do you think might be options available to you to make your discomfort known?
Oh, well, we're very direct. We've made our discomfort known very directly.
Just for the record, I mean, you've spoken about the Commonwealth's position on this. What is the New Zealand position? Because there are grades of disapproval being shown. Australia has been perhaps a little less harsh than you have.
Australia has been very closely synchronised with New Zealand, as has the Commonwealth, as has the EU, as has been Japan, as has been the United States. We know there's considerable concern at United Nations level as well. What has been a little different about New Zealand is they decided to eject our High Commissioner for no good reason whatsoever. We had an extremely experienced High Commissioner who absolutely knows diplomatic conventions, but he was ejected for expressing his country's point of view.
So, in your mind then, what is the necessary first step towards a resolution here?
The necessary steps are for Fiji to show that it's serious about the pathway back to constitutional democracy, and the signals of that are rather confusing at the moment. Some time ago, to meet an EU deadline, the Fiji interim government said they would hold elections by the end of the first quarter of 2009. In the past couple of weeks, they've started resiling from that publicly.
Well, you say the first step is for them to demonstrate something. What would, in your mind, be an adequate demonstration of goodwill in this sense?
Setting out a very clear timetable of how the holding of a census will be conducted and what the pathway to elections is.
Do you think the Pacific Leaders Forum should specifically decline to invite Commodore Bainimarama?
Well, that's a matter we will want to discuss within the forum. We work in a collegial way, a collaborative way within the forum, and in the run-up to October, decisions will be made.
Let's stop talking about conflict for a moment and maybe talk about something a bit more positive, and the conferences that have been going on in Asia recently in an attempt to bridge the gap is something that you have taken an interest in. Do you think the conversation about trying to put a positive spin on international relations, as demonstrated in this Alliance of Civilizations Forum, is going to be an effective one?
I happen to think that the Alliance of Civilizations is an exciting initiative. I think when you see it spearheaded by Spain and Turkey, representing on the one hand the westernized Christian world, on the other the Islamic world, both moderate countries, progressive countries, that's promising. And I think the report reads well. I think it clearly falls into two parts. One, what can be done to solve intractable issues in the Middle East, the Palestinian-Israeli dispute, and the second, looking at broader thematic issues, like what is the role of media? What's the role of the education system? How do we deal with migration issues in a way that don't raise tensions? What about young people? And we had a very, very interesting and successful symposium talking about the relevance of this to our region.
This title, Alliance of Civilizations, is an interesting one and an ambitious one, given that it is directly trying to counteract this whole clash of civilizations idea that's been floating around for a while. And so it starts off on a positive footing, and its ideals seem to be strong. But the report itself, the very first sentence, our world is alarmingly out of balance. Do you think it is?
Well, I think it is, and I think that it's positive that a group of nations have taken on the challenge of combating the Huntington thesis about the clash of civilizations. Certainly I don't, and my government doesn't think a clash of civilizations is inevitable. We think that we can work for an alliance of civilizations where we respect and value each other and acknowledge each other's perspectives, which won't be identical, but are all part of the rich pattern of humankind, if you like.
But that respect and value seems to be in very short supply right now.
We have to build it, and we build it through these kinds of conversations and interactions.
One of the key elements of the report that was put out was a very strong focus and a very strong suggestion that there can be no real progress without a solution in the Middle East. And yet, cynics will, and perhaps with some reason, say that's what we've been saying at forums like this for many decades. Why should there be any more hope placed on this one?
We know that a solution between the Palestinians and the Israelis is absolutely critical to ongoing settlement of broader issues of the Gulf, which has opened up between the Islamic street, if you like, and westernized, Christianized societies. As long as we have that problem unresolved and the Palestinians without the recognised state of their own, there's going to be trouble, alas.
How much faith do you have that people will engage with this? And again, I specifically think of Washington in this context. I mean, do you think there is any force here that will bring anything new to what is already going on?
I think Washington knows that the settlement in the Middle East is critical to long-term peace for all of us. The issue is how strong the carriage of the report into Washington in the lead up to a presidential election season is going to be.